Hi all, in this video let's implement queue data structure in JavaScript. This video is for the beginners. So before starting, let's understand what is data structure. Any of the programming language, we need to deal with the data. So data means like how to insert the data, how to retrieve the data, how to manage it, how to organize the data. So all these things will be around the data. So in that case, we need to understand how we can implement this data, like how we can do this data structuring, like which data structure we need to use for our use case. That is the main point. So that's where the data structures comes into the picture. Most of the cases, we feel that data structure is only needed for the interview purpose. But if we understand it data structure properly, it will help us in the day-to-day coding as well. So let's get started. Like we understood what is a data structure. Now let's understand about the queue. So queue means the real world example for the queue is if you go to an airport or a cinema movie theater, so you will be having a queue where the first in is going to first out. So the first person who is waiting for the ticket, he will be getting out from the line. So that is the first in, first out. The principle of the queue is first in, first out. That is a queue in the airport as well. If you go, the first person who checks in, he's going to out for the checkout, right? So in that way, the name itself, it says that it's a queue. Okay. And in the real world, like this is examples for the real world. But if you understand this in terms of applications, like where we use this queue, so the main major part is like a printers. If you see printer, so who print gives the print first, so he will be in the queue. Once his printout comes out, then the other person comes into the queue. So this is the real world in the application level, the printers for the data analysis, for the image rendering and the CPU processing. So all these areas, the queues will be used for the application level use cases. These are the applications where queues will be used as a data structure. So now let's understand this first in, first out principle of the queue. So now this is like, let's say this is an array, okay? And if you insert 1, 2, 3, 4 like this, okay? The first one is like 1. You have inserted the 1. So now if you want to remove it, you need to remove this first inserted element. The principle says first in, first out. So that's the reason the first element, this element should be deleted. If you want to add anything, any element, if you want to add any element where you can add that element, you can happily add that element at the end. Okay, this is how it goes. When you remove any element, that is known as a deque. When you add any element, that is known as an enque. So these are the things. Now let's try to implement it in JavaScript. Fine. So I have taken a method like a function in JavaScript. Let's create a factory function in JavaScript. It's like it's returns a plain JavaScript object. Fine. So let me take an array constant q. So we are implementing this with an array. Fine. Now we have an array and we have a object. We are returning an object. Now what all the things we need? We need an enque. Okay, right? We need an enque means we need to insert the data. Next we need to delete the data. So it means like we need a deque method. So and we need to display the elements, like that's a peak. That's one method. These are the helper methods. You can have any of the methods like this, like length. You can find out the length of the element. And the next thing is like is empty. You are checking whether the array or the queue is empty or not. Like this, you can have multiple things. Like these two are like the major functionality things, and the other falls under the helper functions. So now let's get started. Okay, like let me do this. So I will make this as a function. So enqueue means you are going to insert an element. Okay, you are going to insert an element in the queue. Then for that, we are using queue dot push and item. So the one who is inserting, he will be sending the item and you're going to push it. So you need to return this. So the reason behind this is you're going to create an object for this. Okay, here you are creating an object. Okay, and this object, this returns an object, return object. And if this object wants to use any of the methods, it will use like this. Then this method, this object also needs to return something for that. So that's the reason we are again returning back here. Fine. Now this is such a simple thing, like you have just inserted an element. Okay, now you wanted to remove an element. Okay, to insert, there won't be any issues. Like directly you can insert whatever the element it comes, it will be adding at the end like this. How many elements you will come, it will be added one after the other like this. But if you want to remove an element, it means like deque, an operation which is removing an element, that is known as an deque. So if you want to remove an element, so few things you need to understand. The first thing is you need to check first whether the queue, okay, whether the queue length is greater than 0, then only you need to remove the things, right? If the queue is empty, okay, you should not make an attempt to remove the things. Fine. So we'll implement this length method as well. But for now, like you need to check whether the length should be greater than 0, then you need to remove the things. Now I'm returning here as well q dot shift. So what is this shift function? So shift is like an inbuilt array method. This is not what we are writing. This is an inbuilt array method. What it do, it remove an item from beginning of the array. So that's what we need. Like the first item should be removed in the array, right? So that's the reason we are using a shift method. Okay, usually what we use to remove an element from the array, we use pop. But if you use pop, what happens? This last element would be removed. Okay. If you use pop, last element would be removed. But here we wanted to remove the first element. In this case, we are going to use shift. This is an array function. Okay. And before removing anything, you're checking whether the queue is empty or not. Okay. Now this is to display the items. This displays the last item of the queue. Okay. Now what we are doing, like let's do this queue and inside this queue dot length -1. It means like it is going to return back the get last element. Okay. This is what it does. Okay. And coming to the length function. So we need to find out the length. Okay. Length of the queue. So to find the length of the queue, just return back the queue dot length, because already this is an array method. So length will be the property for this array method. It will be returning back you the length. Okay. And if it is empty, so if you want to check with the empty one, okay, what you need to do, if you need to understand the length queue dot length. If this is equal to 0, then you can say that is empty, like the queue is empty. You can say that this is an empty one. Okay. And now let's implement one more method, clear. So if you want to clear entire, you can write as many as helper functions you want. Okay. If you want to remove, like if you want to make the queue empty, just make the length equal to 0. So it's like you are clearing the queue. Okay, fine. So these are, you can write as many as helper functions. These are the helper functions, but mainly you need to concentrate on these two. Enque means you are adding an element at the end. Okay, so that's the reason you have used a push. But for deque, you are doing shift. It is like you are removing an element from the beginning of the array. So that's the reason you are using a shift method here. So I have created an object here. So now for this counter, you'll be getting this object, entire object, so it can access this. So that's the reason we are now enqueuing 3 items. So 3 items we are enqueuing. So now let's see. Okay. Yep, I think the method name is wrong. Fine. Now see, it picks the last element. So the last element which we have inserted is 3. So how these elements would be inserted is, first 1 would be inserted. Okay, next 2 would be inserted, next 3 would be inserted. As you are asking to display the last element, the third element was displayed. So now let's do the same and deque. I'm using the counter dot deque, and you no need to call, you no need to send anything. As enque means you need to send an element to insert. For the deque, you no need to send anything. So you will directly remove the things. See now the deque, it will return back. You hear what you're doing. So once you're checking the length is greater than 0 and you're deleting that element, and this shift method, once it is deleting or removing that element, it will return back which element was removed. So in this case, 1 2 3 is a queue items, and now when you deque, the first element would be removed. Okay. Now again, if you do the same, so here you got 1. So again, if you remove the second thing, here you will be getting the 2. So in order to check for the empty things, yeah, let me do it here. So I will take this console. I will do the console here. I will do is empty method here. See, is empty. It is true here because the initial it is an empty. Okay. Now let's check the same thing. Like is empty or not here? It should be false because we have one element. Of course, we have removed two elements. We have one more element. So like this, you can check all the other elements. Okay. And if you want the length element, length function. So let's check this length once. Yep. We'll see. Yep. We have only one element. So this is how to implement the queue data structure in using the JavaScript. So sometimes for the beginner level, they can ask you this type of questions in the interview as well. So try to understand this. Hope you understand the video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for the more videos. Thank you.